Right. This is Gist of the Bible, God's promises and warnings with regard to Israel's possession of the land. Lesson 23. This series was written by Marion Fox and is taught by me, Chris Hill. Let's take a look here. God promised to drive out the inhabitants of the land. So as the children of God are going and they don't have a place to go. They've left Egypt. Where are they going to go? Well, there's this promised land. We go back to Abraham and this promise that's been reiterated over and over and over. And now they have this opportunity to go to this land. But what do you do about this land? It's occupied. It's not like a vacant lot that you can go at. You hear today about interesting about someone will move into a property, get ready to move in, and there's a squatter in there. Someone's already in their property. It's like, well, I bought this. This is mine, and someone's there. Well, what about here, the promised land, and they want to go here, but it's occupied, and this is our land. Well, God is going to give them the victory here. But how are they supposed to go into this? All at once or little by little? Well, Exodus 23 reads, I will send my terror ahead of you and throw into confusion every nation you encounter. I will make all your enemies turn their backs and run. I will send the hornet ahead of you to drive the Hittites, Canaanites, and Hittites out of your way. So it wasn't just brute force that God was using here to clear the land. It wasn't just military strategy. It just wasn't brave soldiers on their own or this idea that they could just conquer their way step by step. God was playing a role in this. And he says one of these tools that he uses is confusion. Confusion. A few years ago, I was over at the amusement park, Silver Dollar City. And I hadn't been there at night in a while, and it was Christmas time. And as we're walking out and there's lights everywhere, I've been to this park many, many times. I know where the exit is. It's so simple. You just walk uphill, you're going to find it. But when at night, they had these Christmas lights and this facade of Christmas lights. So what was one-story buildings in the daylight became two-story buildings or three-story buildings at night because the lights went up, this facade of lights. And I was confused, like, where is the exit? Where are we going? And I was going the wrong way, and I had to start thinking about this, where to go. I was confused there on where I need to be. They say when it comes to directions and going some places that men don't like to ask for directions. You know, we're going to figure it out. And sometimes we just figure it out. That's okay. But sometimes we ask for help. I think there I asked Joanna, now where's the exit at here? But if you're confused, it's hard to put up a resistance if you're confused. Who's your enemy? I don't know. Which way is right? I don't know. I don't know what confusion it was, but God had provided confusion as a tool to defeat the enemy here. Every nation is going to be confused. Sometimes we have in war, we have the term friendly fire. That's where a soldier is shot by or hit or killed by someone on his own team. He mistaked him as an enemy and hurt him. Well, confusion is a tool that God is using here. I will make all your enemies turn their backs. So they're going to turn tail and run. And then he said, I'm going to send the hornet ahead of you. Now, hornets, I don't like being stung. I don't like stung by bees or anything like that. I saw in the news about a lady that was, I guess she went the wrong way in the school zone to pick up her kids, the wrong way in a U-Drive, and the police came and got her and tackled her to the ground and held her there, and her face was right over a red ant's nest there. And they kept her there for a while, trying to, why is she acting this way? And she's telling them, ants are on my face. They took a picture of her afterwards. She had stings all over her face. But hornets, if a hornet was after you, would you run? Yeah, I would run. Absolutely. I don't want anything there. So God is going to use a hornet. And it's going to drive these other people out. It's like, forget the Israelites here. Watch out for those bugs. Absolutely. So God is going to drive them out. But the people of God, they still need to be faithful. They still need to trust him. But here, God is using confusion and insects here, stinging insects, hornets, to drive them away. God revealed how this would be accomplished. Exodus 23:29. But I will not drive them out in a single year. Why not drive out your enemies all at once? Do it all at one time. Be done with them. This is what we need to do. That would make the most sense, would it not? Just drive them out. Well, God knows best because the land would become desolate. While these people were still in Canaan, and God drove them out. Their iniquities came to a full measure and said, enough. But he didn't drive them out all at once because they were useful in keeping the land up while the Israelites were coming in. Because the land would become desolate and the wild animals would be too numerous for you. So if he did drive out everybody all at once and it was just a big vacant lot, well, the wild animals would increase. They say over in Russia, over where Chernobyl was at, that nuclear plant exploded, people moved out of that area. Pripyat, I think was the name of it. The wild animals have really flourished over there. And there's some people still living over there, so we're not leaving, and they're doing fine. But the wild animals have really populated that area. But it could increase to a point that it's dangerous and you can't deal with wild animals. And we know there was wild animals. David talks later on history. I fought the lion and I fought the bear. So there was some animals that could really hurt you and kill you. And you could get outnumbered. We talk about being surrounded, maybe you get surrounded by a pack of dogs. Well, can they hurt you? Well, sure they can. So animals can hurt you. But it says here, verse 30, little by little, I will drive them out before you until you have increased enough to take possession of the land. There wasn't enough people yet to populate the whole land and take care of everything. So it was going to happen little by little. God blessed them a little bit here at a time. I believe good intentions can go wrong. You've seen maybe people who have inherited a large amount of money at a young age, and they just blew it all. It became, instead of a blessing, it became a burden. I don't suggest playing the lottery or anything like that, but studies have been done on what happens to people who came into a large amount of money at one time, and many of them they died at a young age. They or shortly after. They weren't really blessed all the stress of this, or they would end up just losing it all. They didn't know how to manage that, and that happens with when people get often when people get a large inheritance. And if they don't know how to handle that, sometimes it becomes a burden and they just go through it and they waste it. So God is going to bless them little by little here by driving them out little by little until this population here is increased to take possession of the whole land. So this blessing is happening, but it's happening as they can handle it. God established the boundaries of the land they would be given. I will establish your borders from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea and from the desert to the Euphrates River. I will give into your hands the people who live in the hand, and you will drive them out before you. Well, here's another thing. Now they go, how far does this blessing extend? How far does this land extend? Okay, here's your boundaries. Here's what's going to be yours. Okay, they can look at that and they can start planning and they start to understand more about this. It says here, you will drive them out before you. So they're going to play a role in this as well. They're not just a setback all the time. They're also active in this role of driving the people out, pushing them out of the land. These people were being judged for their own sins that they had committed, and God had had enough, and they were going to be pushed away. Yes, John.
I think that is a good example of how maybe God helps us, because a lot of times we think we really can't do something, but we know God will be with us if we try. And so God will let us do what all we can, and he can help us additionally.
Yeah, so John says this is how, maybe an example of how God helps us today, that we do what we can and God helps us along the way as we strive to serve his will and to serve him. I think that's a very good point. We have a role in this, but we understand God has a role in this as well. We want to give God his credit as well. So here it says they were forbidden to make covenants with the inhabitants of the land. Don't make any deals with them, with these people, because they're wicked people, and God's plan for them is to drive them out and destroy them. And so don't make any covenants with these people. He tells them right off the bat, Exodus 23:32, do not make a covenant with them or with their gods. Well, wouldn't it be better? Our God is very powerful. He can part the Red Sea. He's with us. He helped us get out of Egypt. He's giving us all these blessings. That's great. But what if we had this other God too to help us? Wouldn't two gods be better than one or more gods? And that's where this whole polytheistic thinking came along. Say, no, you don't make deals with them or their gods. Their gods are not real gods. They're false gods. These are idols. So don't be making any bargains with them either. Just put that out of your mind. If they would obey God by driving the Canaanites out of the land, there would not be anyone to whom they could make a covenant, right? There wouldn't be anybody there. But he says, don't make any covenants with them or with their gods. And these commandments here are interrelated. They go with one another. God set forth the consequences of disobeying him by making covenants with the inhabitants of the land. Exodus 23:33. Do not let them live in your land, or they will cause you to sin against me, because the worship of their gods will certainly be a snare to you. Here's why you don't make a covenant with these people. It's going to be harmful to you. You think this is for your good. You think it's for the people's good. No. When you make deals with these people, it's going to be to your detriment. Bad company corrupts what?
Good morals.
Good morals, good character. So don't make any deals with these people. And it says this is going to be a snare to you. What is a snare? A trap. A trap. You're going to walk right into this trap. It's going to be set there and you're going to fall into it. Do not. This will be harmful for you. For your own good. This is for your own benefit. God is a benevolent God. That word for Lord is kurios, used in the Bible a lot. That is a benevolent ruler. Jesus rules for our benefit. He's ruling for our own good. So here, God is putting these for their protection. Let's look at Exodus 34 and verse 12. Be careful not to make a treaty with those who live in the land where you are going, or there'll be a snare among you. Break down their altars, smash their sacred stones, and cut down their Asherah poles. Do not worship any other god, for the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. Be careful not to make a treaty with those who live in the land, for when they prostitute themselves to their gods and sacrifice to them, they will invite you, and you will eat their sacrifices. And when you choose some of their daughters as wives for your sons, and those daughters prostitute themselves to their gods, they will lead your sons to do the same. Now think about this. Is this just over the top here? These pagan religions, do they really have their daughters prostitute themselves out there in the name of religion?
Yes.
Yes, they did. Yes, this is not over. This is, yes. Saying they're going to influence your sons and to sin. They're going to lead a lifestyle of sin in the name of worship. And this happens quite a bit in the name of worship or religion. Sin is justified. Oh, you're doing it for this worship of this God. Child sacrifice. Oh, but it's for this God. So yes, that is exactly what is going to happen. So do not make a treaty with them. They're going to prostitute themselves to their gods, and they're going to sacrifice to them. You're doing things in the name of this other God, and he says, I'm a jealous God. Serve me and me alone. Serve the one true God. That's what he's saying here.
Chris, there's a similar passage in 1 Corinthians 7, and I'm trying to find it, but it basically says you're not supposed to marry outside.
So there's a similar passage in 1 Corinthians that Bill is saying that do not be unequally yoked together, is what you're talking about there. Yeah, they would be unequally yoked together. The Old Testament gives examples about animals you don't yoke together. Ox and a donkey, one makes the other sick. You just don't do that. So yeah, we have to watch what we do here. He's telling them here, don't be yoked together with these people. You must, Deuteronomy 7:16. You must destroy all the peoples the Lord your God gives over to you. Do not look on them with pity, and do not serve their gods, for that would be a snare to you. So be careful, Joshua 23. So be very careful to love the Lord your God. But if you turn away and ally yourselves with the survivors of these nations that remain among you, and if you intermarry with them and associate with them, then you may be sure that the Lord your God will no longer drive out these nations before you. Instead, they will become snares and traps for you, whips on your backs and thorns in your eyes until you perish from this good land which the Lord your God has given you. So was this promise here conditional? Was it, here's the land, do what you want, or was there conditions set forth by God? Yeah, conditions.
But they didn't follow.
conditions that they did not follow. He said, here's what's going to happen, and they did it, and here's what happened. So God was very clear with that. Do not, you need, if he sentenced them to destruction, then they were to destroy them here. He says, don't ally yourselves with them. Well, wouldn't it be good to have these allies here? Maybe we could do something with them instead of just driving them out or destroying them, as God said. But he says, you know, if you don't, they're going to be snares to you. They're going to be traps to you. These people are not going to lead you in the right directions. And he talks about whips on your backs and thorns on your eyes. This is going to hurt you. Why what you think is good, it's really going to be bad for you. It says you're going to perish from that good land. Said there's a consequence to not serving him and him alone.
But Chris,
Yes, John.
but you know, the Old Testament talks about the Jewish people. God wanted them to be kind to aliens and strangers.
Yeah, so John says there are
But
scriptures that say be kind to alien and strangers.
With like Ruth, but I guess it's the one aliens and strangers that wanted to be to become Jewish.
Yeah.
And their religion.
So John believes that the being kind to strangers, a lot of them that they were set to be kind to are those seeking to become Jewish, to convert to that religion. But we know that God has also set some aside for destruction. And here the people in Canaan, their iniquity was up to their limit. He was done with them for the evil that they were doing. So if God sets them for destruction to be driven out, then they're to obey that. Because these people weren't seeking to become godly people. They were seeking to follow their own gods and their own religions, which they liked. So God set forth the consequences of disobeying him by making covenants with the inhabitants of the land. Here's Judges 2:1. The angel of the Lord went up from Gilgal to Bochim and said, I brought you up out of Egypt and led you into the land I swore to give to your ancestors. And I said, I will never break my covenant with you, and you shall not make a covenant with the people of this land, but you shall break down their altars. Yet you have disobeyed me. Why have you done this? And I have also said, I will not drive them out before you. They will become traps for you, and their gods will become snares to you. Their gods, following their religion, their idols, it's going to be bad for them. And he says, if you don't do what I say, I'm not going to drive them out. This land, they're going to be there. You're going to say, oh, it's a great land. Too bad it's occupied. And God's not going to work with them if they choose to make covenants with these people. They were to be driven out. You can't make covenants with people that aren't there. God warned the children of Israel about following false gods. Exodus 34:12. Be careful not to make a treaty with those who live in the land where you are going, or they'll become snares to you. Break down their altars, smash their sacred stones, cut down their Asherah poles. Do not worship any other god, for the Lord, whose name is a jealous God. Be careful not to make a treaty with those who live in the land, for when they prostitute themselves to their gods and sacrifice to them, they will invite you, and you will eat their sacrifices. And when you choose some of their daughters as wives for your sons, and those daughters prostitute themselves to their gods, they will lead your sons to do the same. These covenants, these instructions put in place by God were for the good of the people going into the land. You know, sometimes you go in to start doing something. Maybe you're joining college or something, or going to work, starting a new job. If you want to be successful in this job, show up on time, be dressed appropriately for the work that you're going to do, be respectful to your bosses, listen to the customers. There could be a set of rules. If you want to be successful in this work, here's what you need to do. And the Lord has laid out, if you want to be successful going to this land, here's what you need to do. Don't intermarry with them. You need to drive them out of the land. Don't make any covenants with them. Don't make any covenants with their gods. And when you see their places of worship where they do evil things, don't just say, oh, well, you need to cut that down so that practice stops, because it is evil. And if they can do those things, they will be successful. If they trust God, they're going to be successful as they enter this new land. And it will be a blessing to them, and God will work ahead of them by sending out the insects, the stinging insects, by helping them with their bravery to go out and fight these other nations, to help them be successful in battle. He's going to just give it to them a little at a time in a way they can handle it. We sometimes say, how do you eat an elephant? Now, I've never had an elephant. I don't want to eat an elephant, but it's a saying. How do you eat an elephant? Y'all know? A little at a time. That's a way of saying when you have something big to do, you just take it in small bites. You take it a little bit at a time. That's how the Lord's going to give them all this land in small bites, a little at a time. And as their population increases, they can get more and more until they filled in those boundaries that the Lord has given to them. But if you do this, to take this route, you're gonna have all kinds of snares, all kinds of traps. It won't be good for you.
Chris, what he's telling them is tolerance is a trap.
He's telling them tolerance is a trap. That's a key word today, tolerance.
Yeah.
Tolerance. But when it comes to Christianity, people don't tolerate that very well, do they? And it's something they just get away with doing. It's tolerate everything but Christ in today's world. That's how people take that. This was one factor that corrupted the antediluvian, the pre-flood people, Genesis 6, 1 and 2. When the human beings began to increase in number on the earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful and they married any of them they chose. The judgment of the antediluvian men was recorded as a warning to them and to us as well.
Chris, there's been some discussion over what were the sons of God.
Yes, what were the sons of God? And there are much studies on that. I take that the people who followed God versus the people who did not follow God.
That's what I always assumed.
Yes.
That there are some people that say that they were akin to angels.
Yes, but the angels neither marry or given in marriage. So yeah, some people say that was akin to angels, but I take that as the godly people marrying the ungodly, and there was compromise involved in what they did. But that's a good study for another time. God commanded them to consume these nations and not to serve their gods. Deuteronomy 7:16, you must destroy all the peoples the Lord your God gives over to you. Do not look on them with pity. Do not serve their gods, for that will be a snare to you. Now, God is casting judgment on these nations using the Israelites at this time to do that. God is using them. He says, don't look on them with mercy. They have committed sins. The Lord knows what they have done. They're doing wicked things. So he's saying, trust me and do this. They were fooled into making a covenant with the Gibeonites. Now, people who live in the land, they could see, wow, these folks are coming in and they're defeating nation after nation, place after place. We need to do something about this or we're going to be next. So let's look at some trickery that went on here. The princes of Israel failed to consult God, but operated upon their own wisdom. You know, which is greater, our wisdom or God's wisdom? Our wisdom doesn't even come close to comparing to God's wisdom. It's good when we have a difficult choice to make, a difficult decision, to pray about that. God, please give me wisdom. Help me know what to do. When you think of a very wise man in the Bible, which king do you think of? Solomon. He had some wisdom. How did he get that wisdom? God. Yeah, from God. Joshua 9:14. The Israelites sampled their provisions, but did not inquire of the Lord. Then Joshua made a treaty of peace with them to let them live, and the leaders of the assembly ratified it by oath. So these folks came in, these Gibeonites, they came in, and they dressed themselves like they've come from a long journey. A long journey. So they didn't have their nice, clean clothes on. They had clothes that were kind of torn and raggedy, and their food was moldy, and everything was kind of worn out. We've come from a long way away. You can make a treaty with us. We're not going to be in your area you want anyway. We just want to make peace ahead of time. How's that sound? Well, okay, yeah, we're not trying to go over way on those boundaries anyway. That's outside of our spot anyway. So yeah, that sounds like a great idea. But the key part is but did not inquire of the Lord. Now, they would have asked the Lord would have told them, no, these are the people I've been telling you about. Do not make a treaty with these people. That's a covenant. Do not make a covenant with these folks. This is what I told you. Don't do this. But Joshua, man, Joshua's a man of God, a great guy, a wonderful leader. And with these people you think would be good people there, they would have had more success and made the right decision if they would have consulted God. I believe God would have told them, yes, these are not the folks you think they are. So do not make a treaty with them. Thank you. You know, you did good by consulting the Lord, but they didn't consult the Lord. So they made a poor decision when they did this. Joshua 9:19. The children of Israel were obligated to keep the covenant they had made here. Joshua 9:19, but all the leaders answered, we have given them our oath by the Lord, the God of Israel. We cannot touch them now. This is what we will do to them. We will let them live so that God's wrath will not fall on us for breaking the oath we swore to them. So now they've got themselves in a bind. If we break our oath, then that's really a sin against God too, because we made an oath we shouldn't have, but we've got to keep our word. And then, well, God didn't want us to make an oath with them, to make a covenant with them. So they're going to let them live. Okay, they're not going to destroy them, but we got to think of something to do about this. So let's look at their human wisdom here. God warned the children of Israel about cleaving to the remnant of the Canaanites. Joshua 23:11. So be very careful to love the Lord your God. But if you turn away and ally yourselves with the survivors of these nations that remain among you, and if you intermarry with them and associate with them, then you may be sure that the Lord your God will no longer drive these nations out before you. Instead, they will become snares and traps for you, whips on your backs and thorns in your eyes until you perish from this good land, which the Lord your God has given you. The children of Israel did not believe God because they made covenants with the people of the land. That's the inference there. They might have believed it, but they didn't consult God about it, and they made a mistake with this. Judges 2, verse 1. After a long time had passed, and the Lord had given Israel rest from all their enemies around them, Joshua, by then a very old man, summoned all Israel, their elders, leaders, judges, and officials, and said to them, I am very old. You yourselves have seen everything the Lord your God has done to all these nations for your sake. It was the Lord your God who fought for you. So Joshua, the great leader, is about to pass away, and he wants to say, look at where you're at now. You're in this great land the Lord has given you. Do not neglect that. Don't forget who gave you this land. And God did this for you. And there should be an obligation there. God has done this for you. You need to be faithful and serve him with your whole heart. That's what he's leading up to here. Really, isn't that the gist of the Bible, is to serve the Lord your God with your entire being, your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and then to love your neighbor as yourself? That's really the whole gist of this series right here. He's saying you need to love God here and be committed. And look at what he's already done for you. Where you're living is a testimony to his love and his strength and what he's done for you. Well, the children of Israel did not obey God in driving out the inhabitants of Canaan. They did not drive out the inhabitants of the land because they wanted to have the inhabitants as servants. Don't drive them out. We need those people. Who's going to do all these chores for us if we drive all these people out? We'll just think of a better way than God's way. That's where sin really begins. We know a better way. We know a better way. Joshua 16:13. They did not dislodge the Canaanites living in Gezer. To this day, the Canaanites live among the people of Ephraim, but are required to do forced labor. No, we didn't drive them out, but look at what good they are for us. We need them to do all this hard work. Surely the Lord wouldn't want us to do all this work for ourselves here. That's human thinking here, human wisdom. So they didn't fully obey God. Well, we need these people. Look, we put them to a good use. Surely you wouldn't want us to drive out these folks that are doing all this good work. Yes, the Lord said, do this. They're going to be a snare to you, going to be a trap to you. Joshua 17:13. However, when the Israelites grew stronger, they subjected the Canaanites to forced labor, but did not drive them out completely. Again, didn't drive them out. Let's make them do forced labor too. We'll put them to a good use, right? The Lord didn't say to do that. That wasn't the Lord's will. That's human wisdom. Children of Israel did not obey God in driving out the inhabitants of Canaan. They did not drive out the inhabitants of the land because they wanted to have the inhabitants as servants. Judges 1:28. When Israel became strong, they pressed the Canaanites into forced labor, but never drove them out completely. Judges 1:32. The Asherites lived among the Canaanite inhabitants of the land because they did not drive them out. Neither did Naphtali drive out those living in Beth Shemesh or Beth Anath, but the Naphtalites too lived among the Canaanite inhabitants of the land, and those living in Beth Shemesh and Beth Anath became forced laborers to them. You see this pattern? Well, this is God didn't want this, but what a good idea it is. Let's just keep repeating this mistake over and over and over and over. And this is something they can't. Why did they keep making that same mistake? Well, life sure is easier with them doing all the hard work. But God didn't say to do this. That was their choice in disobeying, and they're going to be a trap to them, just like the Lord said. Judges 135. And the Amorites were determined also to hold out in Mount Heres, Ajalon, and Shalbim. But when the power of the tribes of Joseph increased, they too were pressed into forced labor. They've really given up on this whole concept of driving them out, pushing them out of the land, as the Lord says. Hey, we can just keep getting a larger number of forced labor. Where would they learn this whole idea of pressing people into forced labor? Where did this idea even come up with?
Egypt.
Egypt. That's where they came from. That's what the Egyptians did to us. Let's do it to them. I think it came from Egypt. Yes. Terrible. The inhabitants became a snare to the children of Israel. Exodus 23:33. Do not let them live in your land, or they will cause you to sin against me, because the worship of their gods will certainly be a snare to you. Exodus 34:12. Be careful not to make a treaty with those who live in the land where you are going, or they'll become a snare to you. Deuteronomy 7:16. You must destroy all the peoples of the land the Lord your God gives over to you. Do not look on them with pity, and do not serve their gods, for they will be a snare to you. They're going to be a snare to them. This is for your own good. These inhabitants became a snare to the children of Israel. Joshua 23:12. But if you turn away and ally yourselves with the survivors of these nations that remain among you, and if you intermarry with them and associate with them, then you may be sure that the Lord your God will no longer drive out these nations before you. Instead, they will become snares and traps for you, whips on your backs and thorns in your eyes, until you perish from this good land which the Lord your God has given you. Judges 2:2-3. And you shall not make a covenant with the people of this land, but you shall break down their altars, yet you have disobeyed me. Why have you done this? And I've also said, I will not drive them out before you. They'll become traps for you, and their gods will become snares to you. So when we talk about the gist of the Bible, it's to love God with your entire being, your heart, soul, mind, strength, your entire being, and to love your neighbor as yourself here. Here, the number one thing they failed to do was to love God, and it showed it by they didn't trust him to do his will. Now, the Canaanites, they were facing God's judgment for the sins they had committed. They were wicked people, and God was using Israel to drive them out, and also using the insects and other things to drive them out. But the Israelites had a better idea. Instead of doing it God's way, let's just keep some of those folks here and use them as forced labor. That's how sin often begins there. I have a better idea than what the Bible says. I've got a different idea than what God says. So let's take this different idea. Oh, this forced labor, it's a great idea. Look at all the work we did for Pharaoh in Egypt, those 400 years. This is a great idea. Let's enslave other people. They should have known, God said, do not do this. Drive them out. Drive them out. I'm going to give you this land, because if you don't drive them out, they're going to be snares. They're going to be traps to you. And that's how sin works, is it becomes a snare to us. It is a trap to us where we think everything is great. Then all of a sudden we're stuck in the trap. That's exactly how sin works. And God saw that way in advance, looking from above, and said, okay, do it my way. Everything will be okay. You're going to be blessed. But they went off the trap from God's way and stopped driving the folks out and said, well, let's just enslave them. That's a good idea. But that wasn't a good idea. And they're going to be and caught in traps because of this, because of their worship, and what their practices are going to have a bad effect on the people that are trying to serve God and God alone. Now they're going to have that temptation to serve other gods and to follow other practices which God says are sin, and to stay away from. All right, that concludes our lesson for today on a gist of the Bible.
Chris, they're still having problems with that.
Still having problems, yes. Let's see, let's pause this.